Okay, we are live. So, thank you for all of the people that are going to be catching this live stream later on. I am Pat from Mama's Issues and Fixes, and with me is Nicholas, one of my guests, that we're going to start talking about. Well, we have been talking about quite for some time. It's H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, and this one is Herbert West Reanimator. And we have been talking about and doing some commentary about this short story that has 6 chapters. And the one that we're going to read this time, it's called, oh, I
Scream,
missed
the
it.
scream of the
Scream
dead.
of, yes, Scream of the Dead. And I'm just going to try and share the screen. So we have the story. Okay, I think we're there. So can I start this time?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So, chapter 4, The Scream of the Dead. The scream of a dead man gave to me that acute and added horror of Dr. Herbert West, which harassed the latter years of our companionship. It is natural that such a thing as a dead man's scream should give horror, for it is obviously not a pleasing or ordinary occurrence. But I was used to similar experiences, hence suffered on this occasion only, because of a particular circumstance. And, as I have implied, it was not of the dead man himself that I became afraid.
Herbert West, whose associate and assistant I was, possessed scientific interests far beyond the usual routine of a village physician. That was why, when establishing his practice in Bolton, he had chosen an isolated house near the potter's field. Briefly and brutally stated, West's sole absorbing interest was a secret study of the phenomenon of life and its cessation, leading toward the reanimation of the dead through injections of an excitant solution. For this ghastly experimenting, it was necessary to have a constant supply of very fresh human bodies. Very fresh because even the least decay hopelessly damaged the brain structure, and human because we found that the solution had to be compounded differently for different types of organisms. Scores of rabbits and guinea pigs had been killed and treated, but their trail was a blind one. West had never fully succeeded because he had never been able to secure a corpse sufficiently fresh. What he wanted were bodies from which vitality had only just departed. Bodies with every cell intact and capable of receiving again the impulse towards that mode of motion called life. There was hope that this second and artificial life might be made perpetual by repetitions of the injection. But we had learned that an ordinary natural life would not respond to the action. To establish the artificial motion, natural life must be extinct. The specimens must be very fresh, but genuinely dead.
The awesome quest had begun when West and I were students at the Miskatonic University Medical School in Arkham, vividly conscious for the first time of the thoroughly mechanical nature of life. That was 7 years before, but West looked scarcely a day older now. He was small, blond, clean shaven, soft voiced, and spectacled, with only an occasional flash of a cold blue eye to tell of the hardening and growing fanatism of his character under the pressure of his terrible investigations. Our experiences had often been hideous in the extreme, the results of defective reanimation, when lumps of graveyard clay had been galvanized into morbid, unnatural, and brainless motion of various modifications of the vital solution.
One thing had uttered a nerve-shattering scream. Another had risen violently, beaten us both to unconsciousness, and run amok in a shocking way before it could be placed behind asylum bars. Still another, A loathsome African monstrosity had clawed out of its shallow grave and done a deed. West had had to shoot that object. We could not get bodies fresh enough to shew any trace of reason when reanimated, so had perforce created nameless horrors. It was disturbing to think that one, perhaps two, of our monsters still lived. That thought haunted us shadowingly, till finally West disappeared under frightful circumstances. But at the time of the scream in the cellar laboratory of the isolated Bolton cottage, our fears were subordinate to our anxiety for extremely fresh specimens. West was more avid than I, so that it almost seemed to me that he looked half covetously at any healthy living physique.
It was July 1910 that the bad luck regarding specimens began to turn. I had been on a long visit to my parents in Illinois, and upon my return, found West in a state of singular elation. He had, he told me excitedly, in all likelihood, solved the problem of the freshness through an approach from an entirely new angle, that of artificial preservation. I had known that he was working on a new and highly unusual embalming compound, and was not surprised that it had turned out well. But until he explained the details, I was rather puzzled as to how such a compound could help in our work, since the objectionable stateliness of the specimens was largely due to delay occurring before we secure them. This, I now say, West had clearly recognized, creating his embalming compound for future rather than immediate use, and trusting to fate to supply again some very recent and unburied corpse, as it had years before when we obtained a Negro killed in the Bolton prize fight. At last fate had been kind, so that on this occasion there lay in the secret cellar laboratory a corpse whose decay could not by any possibility have begun. What will happen on reanimation, and whether we could hope for a revival of mind and reason, West did not venture to predict. The experiment would be a landmark in our studies, and he had saved the new body for my return, so that both might share the spectacle in a custom fashion.
West told me how he had obtained the specimen. It had been a vigorous man, a well-dressed stranger just off the train on his way to transact some business with the Bolton worsted mills. The walk through the town had been long, and by the time the traveler paused at our cottage to ask the way to the factories, his heart had become greatly overtaxed. He had refused the stimulant and had suddenly dropped dead only a moment later. The body, as might be expected, seemed to West a heaven-sent gift. In his brief conversation, the stranger had made it clear that he was unknown in Bolton, and a search of his pockets subsequently revealed him to be one Robert Leavitt of St. Louis. How do you say that? St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Apparently without a family to make instant inquiries about his disappearance. If this man could not be restored to life, no one would know of our experiment. We buried our materials in a dense strip of woods between the house and the potter's field. If, on the other hand, he could be restored, our fame would be brilliantly and perpetually established. So, without delay, West had injected into the body's wrist the compound which would hold it fresh for use after my arrival. The matter of the presumably weak heart, which to my mind imperiled the success of our experiment, did not appear to trouble West extensively. He hoped at last to obtain what he had never obtained before, a rekindled spark of reason and perhaps a normal, living creature.
So, on the night of July 18th of 1910, Herbert West and I stood in the cellar laboratory and gazed at the white, silent figure beneath a dazzling arc light. The embalming compound had worked uncannily well, For as I stared fascinately at the sturdy frame which had lain 2 weeks without stiffening, I was moved to seek West's assurance that the thing was already dead. This assurance he gave readily enough, reminded me that the reanimating solution was never used without careful tests as to life, since it could have no effect if any of the original vitality were present. As West proceeded to take preliminary steps, I was impressed of the vast intricacy of the new experiment, an intricacy so vast that he could trust no hand less delicate than his own. Forbidding me to touch the body, he first injected a drug in the wrist just beside the place his needle had punctured when injecting the embalming compound. This, he said, was to neutralize the compound and release the system to a normal relaxation so that the reanimating solution might freely work when injected. Slightly later, when a change and a gentle tremor seemed to affect the dead limbs, West stuffed a pillow-like object violently over the twitching face, not withdrawing it until the corpse appeared quiet and ready for our attempt at reanimation. The pale enthusiast now applied some last perfunctory tests and for absolute lifelessness, withdrew satisfied, and finally injected into the left arm an accurately measured amount of the vital elixir, prepared during the afternoon with a greater care that we had used since college days, when our feet were new and groping. I cannot express the wild, breathless suspense with which we waited for results on this first really fresh specimen, the first we could reasonably expect to open its lips in rational speech, perhaps to tell of what it had been beyond the unfathomable abyss.
West was a materialist, believing in no soul and attributing all the working of consciousness to bodily phenomena. Consequently, he looked for no revelation of hideous secrets from gulfs and caverns beyond death's barrier. I did not wholly disagree with him theoretically, yet held vague, instinctive remnants of the primitive faith of my forefathers, so that I could not help eyeing the corpse with a certain amount of awe and terrible expectation. Besides, I could not extract from my memory that hideous, inhuman shriek we heard on the night we tried our first experiment in the deserted farmhouse at Arkham.
Very little time had elapsed before I saw the attempt was not to be a total failure. A touch of color came to cheeks, hitherto chalk white, and spread out under a curiously ample stubble of sandy bird. West, who had his hand on the pulse of the left wrist, suddenly noted significantly, and almost simultaneously a mist appeared on the mirror inclined above the body's mouth. There followed a few spasmodic muscular motions, and then an audible breathing and visible motion of the chest. I looked at the closed eyelids and thought I detected quivering. Then the lids opened, showing eyes which were gray, calm and alive, but still unintelligent and not even curious.
In a moment of fantastic whim, I whispered questions to the reddening ears, questions of other worlds, of which the memory might still be present. Subsequent terror drove them from my mind, but I think the last one, which I repeated, was, "Where have you been?" I do not yet know whether I was answered or not, for no sound came from the well-shaped mouth. But I do know that at that moment I firmly thought the thin lips moved silently, forming syllables I would have vocalized as "only now," if that phrase had possessed any sense of relevancy. At that moment, as I say, I was elated with that phrase. Oh, sorry, with
Mm.
the conviction that the one great goal had been attained, and that for the first time a reanimated corpse had uttered distinct words impelled by actual reason. In the next moment, there was no doubt about the triumph, no doubt that the solution had truly accomplished, at least temporarily, its full mission of restoring rational and articulate life to the dead. But in that triumph, there came to me the greatest of all horrors. Not horror of the thing that spoke, but of the deed that I had witnessed and of the man with whom my professional fortunes were joined.
For that very fresh body, at last, writhing into full and terrifying consciousness, with eyes dilated at the memory of its last scene of earth, threw out its frantic hands in a life and death struggle with the air, and suddenly collapsing into a second and final dissolution from which there could be no return, screamed out the cry that will ring eternally in an aching brain.
Help! Keep off, you cursed little towhead fiend! Keep that damn needle away from me!
Wow. Wow. That was something.
Yeah. So, uh, we were talking a little bit before it started, and I was talking about the character arc of West, Herbert West.
Hmm.
Do you notice what happened at the end there? And can you guess what the character arc that I'm talking about is?
I mean, you mean the last line?
Well, the last line I think sort of reveals the secret that I had actually guessed earlier on. I was sort of making notes as I was reading through this, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess the secret that I think that this last line reveals,
Which is?
that this guy did not die of a heart attack. West sedated him for like 2 weeks in the basement, and then when his assistant came back,
I was
he
going to.
murdered him with a pillow.
Oh, okay. Because I was thinking, I was going to ask you, I mean, after reading this, I mean, I thought, well, I thought differently, to be honest. I was going to bring the question, do you think that maybe Herbert West killed this guy on purpose just to have the body? And he actually managed to do this potion correctly. But I mean, the way that you tell me the story, yeah, I think it's quite what's been, but it is strange. So that means that he was injecting this poor guy this embalming compound that he created supposedly, and he thought that he was doing the perfect job, but he was only like keeping the body without any food and any water, like sedated.
I think he would. I think he knew what he was doing. And the
Ah.
clues that I would take to that would be, for one, he takes the pillow-like object and tries to kill the thing
Mm-hmm.
right before. And if he thought it was already dead, then there would be no reason to do that. He'd be like, "Oh, weird! My embalming solution has reanimated this corpse. That's so weird," right? Like that. He'd be
Exactly.
wanting to study the effects, but when he starts to see it move after he nullifies the previous thing that he put in, which he calls an embalming fluid,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing starts to reanimate, or the thing starts to act, then he immediately kills it. And the other clue would be that he just will not let his assistant near him. He says something about only his hand,
Yeah,
trust
exactly. He
no
was.
hand less delicate than his own. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And so for me, like I don't think a lot happened in this chapter, even though this seems to be their first murder, because I was just expecting this the whole way through. For me, this just represents more of the character arc,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't want to spoil too much, but the next chapter it gets even more into it. But I would say that he's gone past trying to help anyone or do anything. It's not about saving lives or anything. It's just about the experiment, and he's willing to kill for it.
Yeah,
Uh,
but it doesn't seem like he. I mean, I will go into that. I mean, I will said yes, but he. I don't think he did a good job by killing, or like in quotes, killing this guy.
What do you mean you don't think he did a good job?
Because he didn't kill him. I mean,
Well,
I don't know. I
I
don't
think
know.
he wanted to kill him right in front of his assistant, and then with the body as
Uh,
fresh as possible at
mhm.
the reanimating agent there.
Oh, okay, that's why he's not very good at killing people.
Yeah, well, I think he didn't want the body to be dead for 2 weeks. I think that was the whole point.
I wonder because I think he still has some empathy in him, or at least he doesn't want to be caught,
I
or
think
he
that's
doesn't.
definitely true. He doesn't want to be caught, but I don't know about empathy. I feel like that's been draining away.
Mhm.
I feel like in the beginning, he's got this really exciting notion of discovering these new frontiers, and it's not even really that unhealthy at that point.
But
But
now he wanted to make it true.
yeah, now it's not about bringing people back to life. It's more about conquering death, about showing how powerful he is, rather than restoring the world.
Exactly. Hmm.
Something that I think that really fits this sort of writing, and that I notice a lot in this chapter, is sort of the twisted way that he tells us anything. Everything seems to be twisted around so that uh, when we have something that's important, it's sort of talked around until we get to the point. So, uh, what would be a good example? Okay, so we have at the beginning here, yet despite the worst of them, I believe I can myself relate the most hideous thing of all, the shocking, the unnatural, the unbelievable horror from the shadows. And then he goes and talks about it. And at the end, we would expect that, like, I just feel like everything's jumbled in the chronological order.
Hmm.
So the thing says something, and we don't know what it was for several sentences, and then the last line. Here we go. Uh, okay, well, no, okay, never mind. This last one's not a good point for that.
Well, I have. Well, we have already been reading all of these chapters until the fourth, and I think that that's the way that he wrote at that time, and that's the really, I think that's the magic of these chapters, because it's just like getting you around and around until you know what's going to come, and then he
Hmm.
says, and then he say it, and that's it.
Yeah, like if we
But you
went
know
back
what
and
he's
watched.
talking about. Uh huh.
I was
Go
just
ahead.
going to say, if we went back and watched the videos that we made, I think all the way back to chapter 2 or something, I was predicting that he was going to be
Hmm.
killing people to do this. And so, yeah, I think that he's definitely led up to this very well, which is important for suspense.
Yeah, and I think he's also, well, the let's say the narrator. It's telling us how Herbert West have been developing. I mean, his brain, how he's been changing, and there are different things that you will tell that when they started, and that he was his assistant, etc., etc. But you can tell that he, in here at least, as you said before, obviously, that before they were considered physicians, that they were helping people. But
Hmm.
now they have like tear that apart. So they don't. I don't think they're even considered themselves as physicians anymore.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, and
I
not in
mean,
the way that we would think of a physician. Yeah.
exactly. So they're like completely like tear apart. It's like they took their characters. They started off well, trying to investigate something, and then right now they're just following someone else's footsteps, to be honest, because I think the narrator already lost his track, or her track. I don't know. He lost, or she lost her track, and now it's just following Herbert West.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because in this chapter and the last chapter, they talk about the reasons why they wanted that secret place in Bolton that was
Mm-hmm.
going to be like away from prying eyes. And in the last chapter in the summary, it talks about it as their decision. I think it was the last chapter that they had the summary. Maybe it was in the original chapter when they mentioned it, but it's their decision. They make it together, and it's not often that physicians will need to hide the reasons for their for why they're picking a place. And then in this one, at least when it's starting to talk about it, it's West's decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So I'm feeling like the narrator is already losing track
Okay. Yeah.
of what he wanted or what he is living at the moment. So he's like, okay, maybe I was with him, maybe I am supporting him, but he's like left. I mean, he's like far away from me, and I'm like this. I am a different character, and I'm just looking at him doing all of the experiments, and I'm the only one. Like I'm helping him, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. Is I was having trouble seeing any sort of a character arc for the narrator, but maybe
Hmm.
this spinning into helplessness. Maybe that's a good point to take.
Yeah, or maybe the author, in certain points, wanted to give the story a little bit more of like a push because if you think about it, when you have someone that it's really bad or it's doing something really bad, and if no one is helping him or like having his or her back, you are seeing that person as the bad guy. But in this case, at first the narrator was with him, or at certain points was like, we are doing this.
Hmm.
So if you ask me, I haven't felt until this point that Herbert West is a bad guy. They are doing it wrong. They are trying to prove something, but in this chapter, in my opinion, I could feel that I could see Herbert West in a different perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I think that this probably is the chapter that really brings it into light that he is pretty friggin' evil. Not just creepy, not just weird, but pretty evil.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I found some of the specific language interesting. Like for instance, West considers this a heaven sent gift. This
Mm-hmm.
this body that's so fresh.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that that was especially perverse. That this opportunity to murder someone, West sees as a heaven sent gift.
So do you think that could be like a dark joke?
Oh, I didn't take it as humorous, but I just take it as parody and perversity. In that, like, oh, the greatest thing that I have about my wife is that I never have to sleep with her or something like that. It's just like, wow, like that's what that's how you're gonna look at that. That's so upside down.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like twisted. It's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
twisted joke.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I suppose
Uh-huh.
it could be seen as humorous, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And another specific language that jumped out at me was the pillow like. When I first read it, it was pillow. I just read it as pillow that he kills him
Uh-huh.
with. But then rereading it, it's pillow like. And I thought that was a very interesting touch because a pillow is a very comforting thing that you
Mm-hmm.
give to somebody that's sleeping or sick or something like that, just to make their life a little bit easier. It doesn't really change anything. And so the idea that whatever this was not a pillow, it gives us the idea that this body that even if it was still alive, was not getting any sort of comfort in the time that West had kept it.
And I can give you some other resources that they're like treating this. Well, first of all, they were mentioning that they were monsters. And there's in another part of the story or another part of the chapter that they were saying that they couldn't kill that they wanted to kill the object or they kill the object.
Right.
So it's like, even though I wanted to bring this corpse back to life and trying to give that corpse a persona or to bring it back, it's still an object. It's
Yeah,
still.
that is a really good point. Yeah, that it's not a person, it's not even an animal, but an object. Yeah.
But that's ironic because you wanted to bring that. I mean, I'm trying.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to understand the way that they are thinking of how life and death is. So I'm thinking, okay, you think it as a man or as a woman, and until, I mean, when they died, they're just an object. That's it.
Right, right. Yeah.
Then you can create it a monster, or then you can convert it as a human being. So it's a really twisted way of seeing how death works, or how the death is, I don't know, how it's they're portraying it in the story. So this is just
Right.
an object, you have to like forget about it, or it's just like it's just there. I For me I mean, I'm puzzled by it.
Well, I think you're exactly right when you said that uh it's what do you call it, perverse and upside down and reversed, in that the whole point, you would think, of bringing someone back from the dead is you would turn the object of their mere body back into a subject, a person, and yet to shoot it as an object shows that what they're bringing back has no humanity, or at least that's how they're seeing it.
Yeah.
By the way, that was the African monstrosity,
Uh-huh.
uh, and it said had clawed out of its shallow grave and done a deed, and it doesn't tell us what that deed is. Do you remember what the deed was, or did they talk about it? Because I don't think they talked about it.
Good question. It could be the little guy that died.
Exactly, that's what I think it was. Yeah, because they talk about the boy, but I don't think they ever mentioned the monster actually getting it. But I just
Mm,
assume that it did. So I think that's what they're talking about.
yeah. Because that's the only thing. Remember that we were just like reading on the last chapter that this monster appeared with a tiny hand in
Oh,
his
right, it had the tiny hand. That's right. I forgot
mouth.
about
And we didn't receive anything from that sort.
that.
Like,
That's right. Yeah,
I was just waiting for the tiny hand to come again. And
right.
they just mentioned them, they just mentioned those monsters in quotes, like it was out of the blue for them. It's not there anymore. I mean, it's just moving around. Maybe it appeared in their minds, but it's already gone. But they know that they're still around.
The other
At
two,
least
yeah,
two of them. At least
yeah,
two of them. I don't know if they actually um they said that they have to shoot the object, but they never said they kill this one, right?
it, yeah. It
No,
doesn't.
they
It doesn't say what they did with the body after shooting it. So I suppose it could have gotten away, but I assume that they took it down. But
and this is another question. I mean, this is like an open question. What would you think these monsters will, I mean, how could you kill them if
yeah,
they're
well,
not just a normal person?
exactly. Yeah, because obviously the things that would normally activate a human body are not working here. Uh,
Mhm.
I don't want to say too much on that because we get a little bit more of that in the next chapter, so maybe we could talk about that more. But yeah, these bodies are not acting the way that we would expect bodies to act, and so
Yeah.
what could kill them? Yeah, and there was those 6 shots with the revolver, and yeah, I assume that it was dead and that they buried it, but it's not specifically stated.
And specifically, if those, let's say that those 6 shots maybe just sedated the corpse, but it got
Sure.
back to life. We
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
don't know what happened.
yeah.
Well, the good thing is that every single chapter here, it has a little bit of a storyline, and
Hmm.
it has like a little bit of a summary. And it's quite good because you can definitely get this chapter to be presented in any place, and they can actually catch up for what they read at first, which is
Yeah.
quite good.
Yeah, I really like it. Yeah, yeah, it's done, and
Mm-hmm.
it gets you interested. It's like, oh well, this seems like an interesting story. Maybe I should go back and get that other copy and read the first chapter. You know,
Exactly.
if you're coming across this in a magazine or something. So here's a big question:
Uh-huh.
this creature that they reanimate in this chapter, uh, it seems to say only now when the narrator asks it, "Where have you been?"
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that means?
Well, if remember that we were mentioning, well, I thought that this was a really reanimated, that they, I mean, that they already accomplished what Herbert West wanted. But if I go into your theory, then it was just like a normal question and a normal answer, right? Maybe he thought when he fell at that moment when he was talking with Herbert West, um, because it doesn't seem like they tell a lot of story. They only said that he just like got maybe a heart attack and then fell and died, but maybe he just fainted because maybe Herbert West hit him in the head, or maybe he put something straight, I mean, to his wrist, and that's why he just fainted because he was sedated. Um, but because he was waking up, it's like when you're being asked, "Where have you been?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was just like an answer, just like a quick answer. What do you think it could be?
Oh, that's interesting that you're saying that it's pointing out, hey, I've just been here. I just died. Though I took it to be what I would guess is Lovecraft's view of the world, and seems to be Herbert West's view of the world, which is that life is just this peculiar mechanism of the body, and that when something dies, it doesn't have any experience at that. It doesn't go anywhere. It just
Ah,
stops
okay.
existing. And so I felt like this was the secret. Like, even though Herbert West's character doesn't
Mm-hmm.
ask him questions to learn about these deep, terrible secrets, I feel like this was the Lovecraft way of getting us to have this dead creature tell us, in a very, very mysterious and unpronounced way,
Mm-hmm.
that there is nothing else.
Yeah, I could. I wasn't even thinking about it that way, but it sounds pretty logical. It's like a way to close all of like everyone's mouth, thinking that there will be something that you could expect by crossing the light and being dead for a while and then coming back. Yeah, I have seen blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just like it's telling you you just fell asleep. It's just like falling asleep.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that something else that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting about this is that I feel like we were always going to get to this point, especially since we already watched the movie.
Mm-hmm.
But as experimenting with bodies, even though I think it could be damaging to a person, it's distasteful, it's not necessarily evil. You know, if somebody were to cut up a body into 360 slices in order to study it, I wouldn't necessarily consider that evil, even though hundreds of years ago they probably would have. But as soon as you have a rational, experiential creature in the mix, then you have a responsibility to it. In the same way that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, I think, is about Dr. Frankenstein and his responsibility to his creation and how he fails in that. Um, in that it's fine for them to play with bodies. It's fine for them to stimulate muscles. But as soon as they have a living being like this, then it is crossing a moral boundary that shouldn't be crossed. And that's totally aside from the murder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the thing is that they have been disconnected from those objects, and I think that's why they're using the words like objects and monsters. It's not my experiment anymore. It's not a corpse anymore.
Okay.
So that's what I'm thinking. It's like, okay, I'm just going to like annihilate myself from what I did because it wasn't what I wanted. So I'm not
Right.
guilty. I'm not guilty because this just,
Right. It's not my experiment. It's just an object. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's rampaging around, but it's not me. It's them, right?
That's
It's
right. Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Is else they will be telling those creatures the failed experiments, or like my experiments are around, or something like that, trying to I don't know, making them feel that it's their own,
Having
but
some
they are no.
responsibility. Yeah.
Exactly, but they're like, no, 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 that's not me. What they wanted is something pure, something that they could say, oh my God, it's what I said the last chapter. It's like, oh my God, I did the perfect reanimation this time, blah, blah, blah. So they will present it as the first time that they try it, and it's the first time that it worked. But you have hundreds and thousands of failures running around killing people and
Yep.
trying to get into the grave.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Murdering children and things like that. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So there are things that they haven't been telling, but I think that the killing of this kid on the last chapter can give us a small glimpse of what these creatures may be doing. So the
Right.
typical, I mean, if you ask me, I will try to relate. Maybe it's not the way that the author thought about it, but it's the typical, at that time they didn't know what was going on, so they could say, okay, it's like an animal because they have like
Mm-hmm.
claws or something like that, or it was like a werewolf
Mm-hmm.
or a vampire or the typical witch that it's like taking the children.
Right.
So
Yep.
so you could feel that people will start getting onto this like crazy um adventures trying to catch these monsters,
Right. Yep.
right? And saying, oh, it's a witch or it's a werewolf, right?
I'm thinking of that scene in Beauty and the Beast, where they're
Yeah,
like,
with
"There's the
all,
beast," yeah, and everybody
exactly,
cheer.
and all
Yeah.
of like the with the fire, and everyone's just like, oh,
Yeah.
let's kill it,
Yeah.
just like that,
Yeah.
exactly like that. But these guys are just hiding and waiting for someone to drop dead so they can start the experiment all over again.
And sometimes not waiting patiently.
Well, I think we should try to talk about it, I mean, a little bit more, because what would you think? I mean, I know that you have read the next chapter, but try not to say anything if this question already appears as an answer.
I'll do my
But
best.
okay, so what do you think this guy will be doing to this scientists or physicians in quotes now that he woke up after being sedated and trying to like not to get in that injection in
Oh,
him?
I don't remember them saying what happened to it. So I this isn't based on what I read in the next chapter. I expect that they're just going to destroy it immediately. They're probably going to be terrified about it and just destroy it.
Okay. But do you think that it will be Herbert West or will be the narrator to do that?
Oh, I think it's I think it's going to be some sort of a mistake, or it's going to have the revolver out again. You know, I think it's going to be chaos. I don't think there's going to be anything to give the narrator any sense of power for the rest of the story. So, and I think if the narrator were to solve a problem like killing one of the monsters, that would give him power.
Okay, so imagine the narrator in this time. So the first and in the first scene, we have Herbert West trying to do his perfect plan because that's what he wanted to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I mean, based on your theory, because I think I'm going to follow your theory.
Mhm.
So he is trying to do the perfect plan. He is trying to, let's say, in quotes, seduce his assistant of thinking that everything is going to go as smoothly as he already thought in his mind. So he will have someone that will be the witness
Yeah,
of
I think
this
I think
marvelous story.
yeah, I think that is the thing, is that he needs someone to know about this, and so that's why he wants the narrator to watch.
Exactly. But the thing is that in this case, even though he thought about not telling the narrator that this guy wasn't dead and that he wanted to kill him throughout the process, and now having him alive, and at certain point needed to kill him because they didn't want anyone to know about what was going on. What would you think the narrator will be thinking at this time? Should he tell anyone about Herbert West's wanted to kill someone that was alive? Do you think that the narrator will be still with Herbert West after this without questioning himself?
I can't comment on that without referencing the
Same.
next chapter. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that means
Uh,
that
when
we will
when
have
I
an answer.
when I was reading this, I
Mm-hmm.
assumed that the two characters would be together till the end. Based on the way that this entire story opened, I
Mm-hmm.
expected that something very horrible would happen to Herbert West near the end, and it would be so terrible that it probably leaves the narrator almost speechless. That's my guess.
Okay. You know what? I mean, I haven't read I haven't read the last two chapters, but I am feeling that it will be the narrator that will have some sort of like close encounter with the experiment itself.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why. I just feel it. Like he will be the one involved into the experiment. Like Herbert West will get out of his mind, will lose his mind, and will try to experiment with the narrator.
Now that would be. I think that's too good. I think that that would be a really great ending, but I don't
Mhm.
think Lovecraft thought of that.
Oh,
I really do think that
shoot.
would be the most perfect ending, is that he something happens to the narrator and he
Hmm.
wakes up resurrected, reanimated.
Uh-huh.
That
Exactly.
I think that would be the perfect ending to the story, but I don't think that's like, I read the next chapter. I didn't read the last chapter, so I don't know, but I'm
Uh,
guessing that Lovecraft wasn't as smart as you are.
shoot. That will have been a really good ending.
Yeah, yeah, it would. And
Imagine,
the thing is,
imagine.
you could write your own story and have that sort of an ending.
Yeah, I mean, that's why sometimes we're just watching movies and then we get into the end and we're like, oh my God, why? But it's because they tried to change the storyline from the real short story or the book. And that's when they said, oh, I think I have it. I think I have the best ending ever. And then they screw it and everyone's just like, oh my God, you did a perfect job. And then the end just sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
By
why
the
all of these remakes coming. I mean, that's why all of the remakes are coming like out after that. But please go ahead.
I I think, well, this is a topic beyond uh, Lovecraft and the
Mhm.
story, but I think that the reason why we have so many remakes is because a lot of people that are interested in political change are not entirely creative. And so they think that the way to create political change is to take old symbols and images and
Mhm.
to reappropriate them towards a new cause. And I think it's also because the companies have been really worried about financial stability, and these franchises are a lot more safer bet than something new.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
Like, can you think of a remake where they've really significantly changed an ending?
Let me think. I haven't seen lots of movies recently, so I will have to think about it for a little while. Mm, 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 mm. I'll still have to think about it. I mean, I will definitely go that there must be something. There must be a movie.
Okay, well, you get back to me about that.
Yep.
I know a lot of times they'll do reshoots for films nowadays, and so that can significantly change the end. But I think usually the goal for that is just popularity.
Exactly. I mean, the only thing that I can have right now, I know that you don't know a little bit about this, but the thing is that I am into games, right? So,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
okay, so when I was really young, I played Resident Evil 3, which is a really good game on PlayStation. So, and it's Sony. Developed all of this, and it was quite good at that time. So, they recently did a remake for the Resident Evil 3. And let me tell you, one thing that I was really impressed, obviously, since I'm from the old school type of games, it was how it was introduced, how the bad guy was introduced, how the storyline went through the first 10 minutes of the story or the game. And the visuals were really good. I mean, the graphics are really good, but I mean, the end, it's almost the same. Almost, I will say almost. um but the thing is that the storyline changed a lot. And then
Oh,
you
okay.
said, it's like, okay. And then you try to force a different ending, or something that got at the same, this, let's say, the same ending as the Resident Evil, the original one, but they changed certain things just to make it seem like it was a different ending. So it didn't, the people weren't buying it. So even though the graphics were really good and they were improved and everything, then you will say, okay, I'm missing this part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And why you haven't done this? Why, if you were going to change the story and you were going to change the scenery, you could do a different ending, a better one.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, right now they're trying to do remakes, but it's because they're focusing on graphics and better technology and everything, and trying to maybe change a little bit of the storyline, and in the end bring in something different. But the thing is that they are abusing of that ending to try to catch for a different, let's say, sequel of that, let's say, movie or game. And that's what we are not buying that. Like, I am not buying if they're going to get a sequel for something that it's already done. The recent Resident Evil 3, it's already done. You only have that game, and then you jumped into a different kind of game on Resident Evil 4. But that's what I have, like, close at hand to mention it, by the way. I
Okay,
will,
could you
yeah.
be more specific about how they changed the endings?
Okay, so first of all, like, the way that they finished in the end, that they were having this big monster in front of the main character, and the main character was like in this sewer. But it's because I'm sorry, it's because she was running around different sewers, and she went into I think it was a forest at that time in the original. The thing is that they cut lots of sceneries, well, not lots of scenes in the new one, and they present it in a different parts. And one of the icon, I mean, I'm guessing, I was talking to one of my fellow gamer colleagues, and he was saying, well, I think if they use the same resource that they used to scare you before, there is not going to work now if you are old school, right?
Ah,
It scared you in the beginning because you have the game, but then again you get the same game, and then you're going to have the same resources. Then you're going to say, oh, I know what's going to happen next. Then what's going to happen next is not going to scare me at all. So the thing is that they are presenting you a survival horror game. And that's how
Right.
it is. This is how it's presenting to you. So you're a new player, maybe you're an old player, and you're going to start relating to what's going on in the game, and you're going to say, hey, yes, I know this character. Oh yes, I know this set. Oh wow, this is how it looks now. Wow, I remember seeing the streets and how the police cars were around, and the zombies, how they looked. Now they look more like vivid, and you can see like it scares you more,
Sure.
right? But for instance, for me, if because I'm an old gamer, I will say I missed the part when the main character was running around the police station, and she was going around, like going downstairs into one hall where there was a window, and then the bad guy will come straight out of the window, right? But it's me. I mean, I really wanted to see that part, even though
Okay. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
something that um, it was already being used as a resource.
Right. Right. I can understand how there's those really special moments that you wanted to relive and experience again with the new graphics and everything, but that
Exactly. I mean,
they
if
felt they had to change so much. Yep.
yes, exactly. I mean, and the way that they started in a complete different way, because the in the original, the main character will start in an alley, and she will only start like running from two or three zombies, and then she goes into like a storage building, and that's when everything started. And in this remake, she started by being chased by the bad guy.
Oh.
So
Okay.
it's you are at the edge of a seat, like trying to hold it, because you know that Nemesis is around, the bad guy is around, and that she needs to run. So you have part of the storyline and part you moving around the building trying to get out of the building and not getting killed in the process,
Right.
right? So that's those things are different. Those things are different, and I really appreciate what Sony was trying to do with this remake, but I think they did it wrong. And if they're not going to do something as an extra for the game, it wasn't worth it. I mean, you're just improving the graphic line, but that's it. I
Right.
mean, you're not giving me more than 6 hours to play, so it's not enough. For Resident Evil, it could be at least 10 hours with a storyline.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but anyways, that's the game that I have like in mind, that it might be closer to what we're talking about, because I cannot think about a movie that have had a different ending from the remake. Mm, I don't. I will talk. I will talk too much, but I think it, the movie
Oh, okay.
with the clown and everything. I
Hmm.
haven't seen the end of the original one, but I don't know if you have seen both of them,
I haven't
because that
seen
was a remake.
I haven't seen either of them, but I think that the theme in both is that they use as children, they use their sort of plans and ingenuity against it, so it doesn't really matter what they're using. Like I think one uses like a slingshot and things like that against the
Hmm.
monster, and then I think that they at the end they just don't fear it, or they have to have sex with each other in order to leave or something. I forget. I haven't seen any of the films, so I'm not sure exactly.
Well, I remember the last bit of the story from the new one, and it wasn't exactly what you said. But I mean, I don't want to spoil the movie if you want to see it. But um, they were trapped, and they have to fight the creature. And yes, they need to not fear the clown. But I think it's just the scenery, because the movies will bring you the same outcome. You have to run away from the beast.
Hmm.
Mm. But yeah, that's the only movie that I could think about that they made a remake. Yeah.
Yeah, like an exact remake. Yeah, I think that the best way to make a remake is kind of like what they did with this film, in that they took this short story, which was good in its own right, and
Mm-hmm.
they took these themes and these ideas and these feelings, and they made a completely new thing with it. Like, you can read the story and then
Mm-hmm.
enjoy the movie, or you can enjoy the movie and then read the story. It's not like, oh, I've already been through all of this or something. They're different enough. And I think that that's the way that remakes should be, in that, don't just make the same thing again. Even if it's got better graphics or whatever, I don't think that's worth it. But find a new way to take that old story and make it interesting.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm still thinking that the short story has so many resources that they could used in this remake, or well, not remake, but this movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I don't know. Maybe it's because it was in a different time, right? Because let's say the time that H.P. Lovecraft was writing this short story was in 1910, or I'm sorry, 1920, I think,
Yeah,
right?
21, 22, I think. Yeah.
Exactly. So there wasn't like lots of communications and machines and stuff like that. While the story itself here, it's brought into a place where you have technology, we have
Yeah.
machines, we have
Yeah, even
even.
just the idea of having a phone in every house, like, forget a cell phone, even just having a phone in every house, that changes horror stories.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that they rescue from that was like to have, um, I don't know, like part of the mystery of how the story was, you know?
Well, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but in the next chapter, they do have something that they used in the movie, and
Ah,
I think it's even
that's
better
great.
done in the story. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. I'm not going to spoil myself. I'm just going to read it,
Yeah.
and don't spoil anyone if it's going to be listening to this to this. I'm sorry, live stream. Um, just in case, so they can also read it. Oh, I've forgotten to put the link. I'm so sorry, but the thing is that I I I still think that the movie could have been done better.
Oh, sure, sure.
The movie have there are lots of things that could have been brought into that movie.
I think there may have been other Reanimator movies made, like, that, based on this same story. And then there's, of course, Beyond Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator, which, by the way, I think I saw a screenshot, and I
Uh
think
huh.
it's the same actor playing Herbert West. So I'm really excited about that.
Ah, wow, that sounds really good.
Yeah, yeah.
That sounds really good. But what? Which one? The Bride of the
I
Reanimator.
Beyond Reanimator was the one that I think I saw the screenshot for, but
That was the last one, right?
no, we watched Reanimator.
I know, but that I mean, I'm meaning that that was the last one that we watched. I mean, sorry, that was the last one that we could watch because that's the third one.
That's
That
right. It's
beyond.
the third one. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, Beyond Reanimator. Okay. Hmm.
And let me just double check. Yeah, Jeffrey Coe, or Jeffrey, what's his name? Jeffrey Combs. Jeffrey Combs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's right. Yeah, he's in all three of them.
Oh
Oh, it
wow.
looks like. Well, I don't want to ruin it too much, because based on who's in the movies, we know who survives, right? So
Uh huh.
I won't go on too much. But Herbert West is in all three of them. It's that same actor. So
Well, until now, we haven't heard that Herbert West is going to kill himself
he
or that
disappears. We've heard
he
that since the very beginning of the
disappears.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a typical. I think it's the typical thinking of a mad scientist that is not having what he wanted, right? And then he screwed up in front of someone. So
Oh,
he needs
okay.
to like go away, reorder his thoughts, wait until the person that watched him doing that forget about him, right? It's like, okay, you saw me screwing this up. I don't want you to be telling the police or like telling anyone about me. And if you're going to do that, I will definitely disappear, right? So it's like
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to try to reorder my thoughts and try to get away from you that have already seen that I'm screwing my experiment in this case.
Sure, yeah, he could be just hiding from the narrator. I never considered that. I just see so many of the same sort of feelings as Frankenstein that
Mm-hmm.
like I'm expecting him to have maybe this end in Antarctica with one of the monsters chasing after Herbert West. Uh,
Wow.
because like maybe I'm reading too much into it, but even in this chapter when they said galvanize, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, galvanize, that's straight from Frankenstein. Like they never used it that way before then. Um, when lumps of the graveyard clay had been galvanized into morbid, unnatural, and brainless motion. When I saw that word galvanized, I immediately thought of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Maybe that's reading it too much, but that's why I'm expecting more things from that story to be in this story. But I could be wrong. We'll see.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, I think that will be it. Um, I wanted to bring something up, but I don't know if I should. Um, I mean, I am guessing. I mean, I was thinking that maybe the narrator was telling the story like in a past tense, but it's because he's like forward in the future. But I also thought about it now that we are thinking what could happen to Herbert West. Maybe he passed or he was killed by one of the experiments. But I don't know. I mean,
Herbert West, do you mean?
yeah, I
Or
mean,
the narrator?
no, Herbert West, because the
Okay, yeah.
narrator at certain points, I mean, he's talk everything he's been talked about. I mean, all of the story, it's in past tense,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
and
We start 17 years
mm-hmm,
in the future from the beginning of the story,
mm-hmm,
and we get specific dates. Like this one, it says specifically July 18th, 1910.
mm-hmm, exactly.
And I think it also says something about 7 years, or yeah, this is 7 years after the story began and 10 years before the present day. Uh, yeah, so we do get a clear, definite timeline here.
Yeah,
And for me, I've got kind of an analytical mind, so it's nice to be able to actually put dates to this stuff, to think about how this is progressing.
and you know what? When I read the date, you know, I think it's some sort of like a game, like a what's this called? Like a cognitive uh, puzzle. You know why?
Uh, Go on. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, but
Okay, I'm just going to bring this up. Maybe I'm just crazy, right? Um, the thing is that you said July 18th of 1910. Okay, so let's change July for a 7. Okay? So what
mm-hmm.
we have it's 7, 18, 19, and 10, right? So let's say that we're going to sum the first two. So we're going to add them. So it's 7 plus 1 is 8. So it's the following. Okay. And let's get the next ones. So the next one is 1 and 9. And we can sum it up and it will be 10.
I think that that's interesting, and if we had a numerologist here, I'm sure they'd be totally on board. But I think those sort of number tricks can be done fairly easily. I wouldn't look at them in terms of summing it and coming to those sort of conclusions. Uh, For me, if I were to guess, I would say that he's trying to set this in the past to give it some sort of depth in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I imagine he's just trying to move through the timeline. I'm guessing he didn't have this totally planned out when he started writing it. So if you're right and he's got all these secret codes in there, then he's put a lot more thought into this than what I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's because I cannot relate a specific and a specific time why he's using a specific time like this.
Uh,
I mean, I know that he's trying to make it a relationship in between the 17 years and now, like trying to go back into the past and everything. But why July and why the 18th and why 1910? Just that. I was just curious.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's very much thought of it put into it. I just think that it's being put into the past. I think that he's selecting a summer month,
Hmm.
and he's probably selecting a number that does not sound fixed. Like there are some numbers like 15 and 10 and 20 that almost sound like they were planned out, whereas
Hmm.
18 seems a lot more random. Um,
Okay.
Yeah, but if there is more to it, like the summing that you're talking about, or some other specific meaning, then I've missed that.
Okay. Hmm.
What do you think about the fact that Herbert West is described almost identically, in that he's very slight and blonde and has the spectacle blue eyes,
Hmm.
uh, and that his appearance has almost not changed in those 7 years? What do you think that means anything?
Um. Well, I could relate that they haven't even changed because they're trying to focus on the
Right.
experiment. But the other part of the story that maybe we are not reading it because it's down in the last two chapters it's because Herbert West is actually injecting that potion in himself, and that's why he's not getting any older. Like he's still young.
I didn't think of that, but I think that that's definitely possible. Yeah. I think you make really good points in that this could be a suggestion that he's using the or some sort of an agent on himself, like he did in the movie, even
Hmm.
though we've been told several times that they can't work together. Uh,
But I
I
wonder because that's the thing in the movie. It was brought to us that he was using the potion for himself,
Yeah,
but he was also using the same potion to try to bring the corpses back.
that's right. There was no problem with this intermixing of natural movement and unnatural movement. In the film, it worked. It seemed to work on him like some sort of an amphetamine, and
Hmm.
it worked on the zombies to activate them. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm guessing that there must be something, some sort of resource on those two chapters that we're missing that might bring that, and
yeah.
that's why it was used in the story, like in the movie.
I think that's a good point. I think you're probably right. Yeah, and I think it's also a really interesting point that you made about how these two are so fixed on their studies and their
Mhm.
discovery that they just haven't changed. That they're totally petrified or like mesmerized and stuck to this, and so they don't change.
I think they have seen themselves in their white robes and with maybe the same glasses or the same tubes and the same potion, that they're not focusing on themselves but on the experiment itself, and that's why they don't feel that they have grown any older.
Hmm.
Especially Herbert West.
Hmm. Something else that I thought about was that there's this idea of sort of the old ancient wizard or witch or alchemist or somebody living in the wilderness that's dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
and they're engaging in some sort of forbidden practices in order to stay youthful. And so there's that sort of motif that I could see him wanting to bring into this.
Okay.
And the other thing that I find really interesting is that you have what I would guess is probably what Lovecraft thinks is almost the perfect person. I imagine that Lovecraft likes blue eyes. I imagine that Lovecraft likes blonde hair. And so there's this little slight, like light voiced, soft voiced doctor who at first glance would just seem like the sweetest guy, like, yeah, definitely have him in your town and things like that. But you look a little bit closer at him, and there's this horrible truth that could drive you insane, which is that this doctor is really, secreting away bodies and killing people in order to do these hideous experiments.
Okay. It sounds credible, but do you think that H.P. Lovecraft wanted to be Herbert West, or it's personifying himself directly into Herbert West's character?
I think in many ways, I think he would identify more with Herbert West. Just like in his rants against Puritanism, this narrator character seems to be naive and clinging to these old, it specifically says near the end there. West was a materialist, believing in no soul and attributing all the working of consciousness to bodily phenomena. So I think this would describe Lovecraft if I were to guess. I don't know that, but I'm guessing that.
Okay.
Consequently, he looked for no revelation of hideous secrets from gulfs and caverns beyond death's barrier. I did not wholly disagree with him theoretically. So I get the narrator is saying, hey, in theory, you're right. Like the science is right here. Yet held vague instinctive remnants of the primitive faith of my forefathers. And so I'm seeing this being described as it's not good to have this faith of the forefathers, and that he should move beyond this. But if he is to move beyond this, then he might encounter these horrible realities. Like a few videos we talked about it where I think that Lovecraft has this theme about the truth being incomprehensible and really horrible in a beautiful way, that if you pursue it, that you'll become addicted to pursuing it, and it will drive you insane.
Okay.
And so that's where what I get here as well is that Herbert West is this ambitious guy that's doing this dangerous thing that's going to drive him insane in the way that Lovecraft, I think, went insane. But the other guy is naive, but he's the safe one. If you just listen to this naive guy that said, hey, you shouldn't be resurrecting bodies and murdering people, then they would be safe. They wouldn't have these horrible monsters. Go ahead.
But the thing is that he never mentioned that. I don't think the narrator have said that to Herbert West.
That they shouldn't be doing this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think he's just thinking it to himself or to herself.
Sure.
Because I haven't read at certain point the narrator telling Herbert West, you have done wrong, you're killing people,
right.
Being all of this. I mean, he's actually naive. He's naive enough just to follow Herbert West's footsteps, but he's like, I don't have any horizon to go to, so I don't know what to believe. So I might just believe what Herbert West is doing. I guess.
Yeah, you're definitely right in that he never confronts him.
Exactly. He never confronts him.
And he never even seems to try to pull him back. Like sometimes when you're afraid of someone and you don't want them to do something, then you'll find ways to try to convince them to do otherwise, but he doesn't even seem to do that.
Yeah, I mean, at first he was saying that he was a really close friend. Then he is only mentioned that he was his assistant, and that's it. So I don't know if in one part of the story we lost track of the I don't know of the friendship, or the narrator just drop it just to have purely professional experiments, and that's it. No friendship at all because of how he's acting. But if that's the case, and he is, I mean, if the narrator is just like at the edge of his beliefs with Herbert West, I think this last drop that came out of the glass with having this person that was embalmed supposedly and was killed, or he died and now he's awake and alive, could bring that narrator to do something else, but I don't think it would.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I would like to see some change in the narrator, but I agree with you. I don't expect that. It
And
was you that saw any change in the narrator at all. For myself, I just didn't see any character arc.
yeah, I mean, it's a subtle. It's really subtle.
Mhm.
It's not. I mean, it's like the narrator doesn't have any feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just telling Herbert West's feelings and what will we thought of what he's doing as a feeling.
Right. Yeah.
But he's not portraying things like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I think I'm just going to run away from him. Or, oh my God, he's just doing so wrong. And I'm just going to tell the police about this person because it's not right what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's something that, like, up till now, I have not enjoyed, is that the narrator does not seem to be filled out. But some people might argue against me and say that it's better this way, because by having a blank narrator that says so little and does so little and changes so little, it really allows us to be the narrator, you know? It's not like the narrator's going around and doing things and saying actions and that we really disagree with. We can, in that he does so little, we can understand how we could be him.
Yeah, and especially that he's not portraying himself or herself as, the main character.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, it is Herbert West, the Reanimator.
It's,
It's not me. Yep, yep.
mm-hmm. And we are part of it. We're part of the story because we are also witnesses of what's going on. So the narrator is telling us what Herbert West is doing, and even though he's the main character, we're also being considered as the secondary characters because we actually don't know what we should do.
Sure.
We,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
we have our mouths shut because we are not there, but we are listening to that, but we don't have any, let's say, emotion from the narrator, so we don't know how to feel.
Yeah. Other than just terror.
Exactly. It's like it's something really bad and horrible that's been told to us, but we don't know how to react because the narrator doesn't show that. We should be, I mean, that's the empathy. So we're trying to have empathy to whom? Right? The monsters are being characterized by monsters, by objects.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't actually feel something to them.
Mm-hmm.
The narrator is not showing you any emotion. So you cannot relate yourself with a narrator. So the only one that you have left is Herbert West.
That's interesting, and I do think a lot of people would identify with Herbert West when reading this. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're meant to identify with the narrator, and we're meant to feel out of control with that building sense of out of control that you were talking about, and terror. But I think that a lot of people would identify with West, just like I think a lot of people that read Batman identify with the Joker.
Exactly. I think we cover almost everything. Do you have something else to bring here?
I just saw a line that could prove me wrong.
Okay.
So I was saying that the being was alive.
Uh-huh.
But over the so very little time had elapsed before I saw the attempt was not a total failure. A touch of color came to the cheeks, hitherto chalk white. So before he was totally white, the body was totally white, and then suddenly nodded significantly, and almost simultaneously, a mist appeared on the mirror inclined above the body's mouth. And so the purpose of this mirror over it is so that if someone is breathing, you will see the sort of fog up the glass. And so the fact that you didn't see that earlier, that seems to argue against my idea that he was dead.
But it depends, you know.
Or he wasn't dead, I mean. Go ahead.
I mean, it depends, because remember, I mean, going with your theory, Herbert West wanted to portray to the narrator as the perfect plan. So the narrator is telling us the perfect plan, right? So we maybe don't know what's going on behind scenes, right? So we are seeing that this guy, it's coming back. I mean, he has like color in his cheeks. But the thing is that maybe this being sedated will create something in the body that will lower your heartbeat, so you won't have enough blood coming. I mean, going around your bloodstream. And there is another part that you mentioned about the mirror. We don't know exactly if the mirror has been there for the entire time.
That's true too. Yep.
Right. So he said, okay, we're going to put the mirror, and he just starting to like blow it, like to have like breathe in. But we actually know that it might be because it was sedated. So he was breathing really slowly. So you couldn't even tell that he was breathing.
Yeah, and if he is alive, that might explain the line spread out under the curiously ample stubble of the sandy beard. The first time I read that, I assumed the guy was dead. And I know that as the skin dries up on this is kind of gruesome, so stop me if you don't want to hear this, but in a corpse, as the skin dries up and the tissues sort of dry away, there's the appearance that the facial hair is growing and the nails are growing. And the reason why there's that appearance is because all the tissue is receding away from it.
Yeah.
And so the first time I read this, I thought that Lovecraft was aware of this. And so when he said spread out under the curiously ample stubble, I assumed, well, this body's been dead for 2 weeks. But I think this might be more evidence that, yeah, he's been alive for this amount of time, because if this thing was embalmed and preserved, we should expect that we wouldn't see things like pronounced nails and stuff.
Exactly. I mean, it would have been really strange for Herbert West to create the perfect embalmed potion.
Yeah, that was something that struck me as well while I was reading it. I was like, he came up with this perfect embalming potion. Like that's a discovery worth telling people about, right?
now that I think about it, in the last chapters, they were saying, I mean, at least the narrator was saying that Herbert West didn't want to use nothing that has to do with embalming a corpse, because that will stop the potion to work. So it struck me when he was saying that he was using an embalmed potion to wait for this assistant return. But I think he just planned it completely. And I don't know if it was actually 2 weeks that he was waiting. Right. I mean, I'm still debating that maybe it wasn't 2 weeks, maybe it was only a day.
Sure.
That he had to sedate this person, because if you're sedating someone, you have to like get I think it's an IV to get that body to have water. I mean, you will have to be like
keep them.
Yeah. Exactly. So you have to be like a great physician to keep a body without decaying if it was dead, or if it was alive, having the perfect sedated potion or well, I don't know, medicine to or a medical procedure not to have that body to dehydrate it until death.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know. So I again, I think H.P. Lovecraft is because of what he had been reading his entire life. Because remember that we mentioned the last time that he really loved to read, especially to read, and he was reading all of his grandfather's book in his private library.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing, and because he also loved like the detective kind of reading, so that's my thought. Like that's he gets all of this notions of what he's telling in this short story because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that will be it. Do you have anything else to mention?
Uh, I'll just say generally, it is
Mm-hmm.
really impressive, both to tell a story in so short a time and have it be so interesting and vivid. And it's also really interesting to me to have something interesting in these little episodic
Mm-hmm.
clumps. Um, I've never really read anything in this sort before. I'm really used to chapters that sort of develop a story a lot more than these little episodic things do. And I'm interested. I just find it really interesting how it's done. And I realize he didn't like it, but and you can sort of see him rush through things. So that might be one more thing that I'll mention here is that when we get to the chapter, Herbert West, whose associate assistant I was, and he's going through all of this stuff. The awesome quest had begun when West and I were students at the Miskatonic University Medical School in Arkham. Like it seems like he's just trying to jam all this information in when he's doing these summaries, and I wonder if he was told specifically what he had to mention again, and if he's just like, screw it. If I have to say all this stuff, I'll just jam it in a paragraph.
Well, yeah, maybe he thought that they were going to split the short stories as well. So maybe he wanted to have all of that condensed because he has been telling the same story or the same summary in the last chapters as well.
Well, yeah, like these were published in different magazines, right? Like each chapter was published in a different edition.
Uh-huh. Well, you can tell that for the way that it's been written.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so that's why he has the summaries here, and I find it really interesting. And I understand he didn't like it, and I can sort of feel every time he does a summary, especially as we get to these later ones, it seems like he jams in a bunch of information, and then he
Mm-hmm.
sort of has a little bit more time to talk about the interesting new developments.
Especially because you don't have enough space, right? It's like, oh my god, I need to tell of the story. I need to like retell it again and again and again. It's like, oh my god, shoot.
And can you imagine doing all of this with a typewriter? Have you ever had to use a typewriter?
Yes, I did when I was in high school, of
Yeah.
course.
Well, it was pretty rare for us to use typewriters here, but there's been a couple times where I've had to write a paper with a typewriter, and that is a
Okay.
long process.
And I wasn't using the electrical one. I was using like
Yeah,
the mechanical one.
yeah,
And
exactly.
that one was, oh my God, that was terrible.
The
That
keys are
was terrible.
jamming, and you get one typo,
One,
and yeah,
and then you have to like screw it, get another paper, write it
yeah,
again.
yeah.
My God. Yeah, that was terrible. Those were hard times.
And I bet you paper was a lot more expensive back then as well.
Yeah, yeah. Everything was more expensive.
And when we were talking about how for each of these chapters, each of these parts of the story, he only got $5.
Mm-hmm.
He had a monthly goal that he wanted to make at least $60 a month because his rent was about $40 when he was living in one particular place. And so this was less than a twelfth of what he wanted to make in an entire month that he would make on one of these stories.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the stories, you know. You can be writing as it was a short story as well. I don't think that he was going to write a short story in a month, right?
I think this was some of like this was his first work that was really published. I think,
Mhm.
and I think that this was the one story. Like we could look at his publishing history, but I bet you we're going to see that he doesn't get his next story out until 22, 23.
That's like working with. I mean, working in something that doesn't even. I mean, it's not even worth it at
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time, of course.
Well, I can say as a writer that makes very little money on the work that he does, that a big part of it is has nothing to do with the money.
Yeah, of course, of course. But the thing is that he also wanted to like support himself with that, but because I don't think that he had any other source of income. So
Yeah, yeah. He had a modest inheritance that he had inherited from his mother when she went to the insane asylum. But she was already like she had inherited that money, and it was very small because his grandfather Wimple, who is a very like a businessman. He had made several fortunes and lost several fortunes.
oh,
And when it came to the end of Wimple's life, it was revealed that his funds had been severely mismanaged, and so the
okay.
money that his daughter got was almost nothing. And then Lovecraft got the last pieces of that.
Okay. Wow. That's even worse. That's why. I mean, if I know that I don't have enough income or enough heritage or enough money to get from, I mean, I'll try to write as much as I can and try to deliver it as much as I can to magazines or to publish something, at least one or two books per month, or trying to do it.
Per month.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying like it will be like a big book. It will be like maybe a 30-page book,
Oh, okay. Sure,
like
sure. Yeah.
something small, right? I mean, I'm not. You're not going to write like 700 pages word. I mean, work in 1 month,
Hmm.
but that will be like your masterpiece,
Hmm.
right? But you still have different stories that you want to write and you want to try to publish, especially if you are running out of cash.
Yeah, but it's hard to be reasonable. Like I, I've told you about my money situation with all
Mm-hmm.
the changes that are happening now,
Yeah.
and I've made the decision to move to a much cheaper place, uh, just to try to survive. Like that's how important my writing is to me. And I could just get a job somewhere for someone and pay the bills that way, but I would rather be like Lovecraft and eat expired beans from a tin and work on my writing.
Wow. Well, I hope that you don't lose the technology in this case.
Well, yeah, that is one amazing thing about the current times is that I can do so much research from home if I just need my computer and the internet. It really is a fantastic time to live for that.
Yeah, exactly. You have so much, but the problem there is that there have been so many things already being done that you
Hmm.
need to sound not repetitive or not copying anyone's work.
Yeah, with the rise of the internet, and again, we're getting off topic here, but
Mhm.
with the rise of the internet, I see a lot of similarities with the Gutenberg printing press in that when that came out, there was just a huge explosion of print, of things in print. So many people that before could not have their work in print got their work in print. And just like the internet, what that means is that there's going to be a lot of crap out there. And
Oh,
you have to work hard to rise above the crap because crap floats.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, and so uh, it is definitely something to keep up with. I feel like my work is better than a lot of work out there, but getting it discovered is another thing.
Yeah, exactly. But you need to push it. That's the
Hmm.
only way to get at least recognition to
Yeah,
push your work.
yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
Mhm. Well, I think that will be it. I think we cover almost everything. maybe there will be certain things that we haven't covered. But as I said in every single live stream right now, if there is someone that wants to mention something, that wants to comment, that wants to say something about the story or about what we should read next after the short story, we're still debating. I think we still have to like sit down and rethink what we're going to read after that. I think it will be some of the H.P. Lovecraft again, but we'll still have to debate about it. But apart from that, I think we're going to come here again at the same time next week to keep on reading Herbert West Reanimator, written by H.P. Lovecraft, on its fifth chapter. So, Nicholas, do you have anything else to say?
I had a really great time this evening. Thanks for everyone that's watching, and definitely, if you can think of any way that we could improve our content, let us know.
Of course, we are really open to any comments about that, specifically that what you want to watch, what you want to receive, because there are certain things that we can use as a resource. Maybe we are using it wrong and you want something extra for the content. We are up to it. Okay, so if that's it, I hope that everyone had a great time as we did reading this story, and catch us next time on Tuesday to read the next chapter of this short story. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Pat. See you next week, guys.
Okay, see you. Hope to see you guys soon.